I think if more of us started looking at ourselves as earth keepers, our relationships with not only the earth, but with one another would change differently too. Because I think one of the main things that you really focus on throughout that school and throughout that class is the principle of oneness, where it's like if you can look at anybody and you can find a little bit of yourself or your past in them, it becomes so much easier to like live with unconditional love. When you're looking at everybody outside of yourself, and you're seeing them like as a stranger, then that's exactly how most of your life is going to be lived, you know? And that includes the energetic aspects of your life too. Like the more you become one with your land and the critters on it, you know, the bees, the snakes, the bugs, like all that kind of stuff, and you recognize them as viable, important, that are on this planet, like then the more abundance and the more benefit you're going to receive from the land.
Well, we are so excited to have you here. I haven't even written any notes because I know I don't need to.
Yeah. The talker from way back.
Well, you're just so interesting.
Oh, well,
so,
thank you.
Yeah, I love listening to all your stories. So,
yeah, thanks.
You know, obviously we're here, we want to talk about all of the things that you do. So I don't know, I mean, you can just tell us everything that you do and everything that you love and all the things that you're bringing to this world. We want to hear all about it.
Okay.
Where it all began.
Where it all began?
Yes.
So I moved to Nashville in 1997, and I was started out, you know, as everybody does in Nashville, with a second job, waiting tables and bartending, trying to achieve a goal. But I wasn't here for music. I was here to do wardrobe. I was in college, I was pre-med, I was going to become a doctor. And like halfway through my junior year, I decided that I wanted to do fashion design instead, which was, you know, my parents were really excited about that choice. So instead they'd like, and I also came out of the closet like that. So it was like a whole big conversation.
Oh, yeah,
it was
that's
like
a big one.
Big life disruption, you know? So they were like, you need to take a semester off from school before you go back, and like, so you can really figure out things. And I was bartending at a dinner theater in Wisconsin, and one of the other bartenders was like, oh, if you love clothes and fashion, you should meet my cousin. She lives in Nashville and she's one of the wardrobe stylists there. And, you know, I grew up in a small town, Wisconsin, didn't really know that job existed. And so I met with her, and I ended up moving to Nashville like 2 weeks later with $150 in my pocket. And I was, you know, gonna chase my dreams, right? And through multiple connections, I met this woman named Jennifer Kemp, who became my mentor, and she gave me my first job in the wardrobe business. And I worked in the music industry for 23 years. There were a few years, you know, like 2017, 2018, that I was dressing, you know, upwards of like 25 people for the red carpet at the ACM Awards. I look back now and I'm like, I have no idea how I did it, other than the fact that I was probably like, you know, fueled on pure adrenaline, you know, during that. But I think, you know, the music industry was like so rewarding for me. Like it was like I got to be so creative, and I had formed some of the best friendships and relationships that I have had in my life. But it was also one of the saddest and darkest experiences of my life too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a lot of narcissism and greed and
I know what you're talking about.
I know, right? In the entertainment business, you know, everybody's always searching for something. There's great desperation that comes along with, you know, when you strive and when you're, you know, chasing after your goals.
Yeah.
Like, you know, even though, yes, the outcome is going to be positive for you, like, you know, can be a lot of dense energy that can reside around that's not serving you in the pursuit of that goal. For me, I had like a few years where I was so overwhelmed in like around 2010, 2012, like with my work, that started drinking very heavily and self-medicating. I was having really bad anxiety. My body I was, you know, feel like getting up in the morning and get like dry heaving, feeling like just physically sick about having to like go to work and to be around, you know, like in certain circles of clients I had and things like that. You know, it was like I didn't feel like that, like the level of appreciation, or even just like, you know, the level of humanity, right? That people talk and deal with one another, you know. It's very like blunt and abrupt, and, you know, there's not the humanity gets sucked out of the business, I
Oh,
think
so
sometimes,
true.
right?
Yeah.
And so I was at a place where I was like having to, do a shot of vodka in the morning at 7 a.m. before I would go to do a
gosh.
photo shoot, or before I would go to the mall to go shopping, which is something that was like a huge part of my job. But I would, have to stop like halfway through a shopping day at the mall, like to go sit down and have lunch and have a drink, because it was just, and then of course, like when you start drinking like that, then then you start going into those withdrawal periods of the
Right.
day, right? And
Yeah.
so then, and the only way to get out of those is to have another drink,
Sure.
right? So
Yeah.
there was about 2 years, 2.5 years that I felt like I can look back now in all honesty and say that I was probably like wasted like most of that
Wow.
time. I was very functional about it though.
Yeah.
Like, people knew that like I probably drank too much, but it's the music business and they were probably doing the same thing
Everyone
too,
does, yeah.
And you're
it's
empathic.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so, and all it was doing was lowering my vibration. And so, I decided that I needed to like take a, drastic shift, like as far as my, my client list went, but then also that I needed to quit drinking. Like
Yeah.
I was self-aware enough to know that if I didn't get a handle on it, like someone was going to come along and they were going to try to do some type of intervention or
Yeah.
something like that, and, the Gemini in me is not going to stand for an intervention. Like I
Right.
was like, I'm like, if people would have sat me down and tried to call me out on my shit, like I would have been like, well, just so you know,
Yeah.
this is, and I would
what
have
I
went
think
off on
about
their
you.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm like, well, what about your
Yeah,
eating
I have
habits?
some points to make.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, it was just, luckily though, I mean, being empathic and like having, carrying that gift and not really knowing how to use it at the time, I think I carried such guilt because I would get downloads with people. Like I would be sitting having a conversation with someone, right? And they would bring up like, oh, I just met this great guy and blah, 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 blah. And, and immediately their guides are like, it's not going to work. He's going to cheat. Like, that kind of thing. And they'd be like, oh, what do you think of him? Isn't he great? And I'm like, oh yeah, he's good. And it's like, I have
Yeah.
a very telling face, it's like, no, tell me more, And I'm like, well, I just feel that it's not probably going to be a, relation, and I would go into this whole thing. And then the next morning when I was like sober-ish, like I would have this great guilt that would like come up about like a lot of the
Being
things that I would tell people,
Yeah.
right? Because, being an empath, like you'll get downloads in certain situations. Like I can sit here with you and have a whole conversation and like tap into your guides with your permission. And they may let me know things that are coming up for you, but like they may not necessarily serve you at the time to know it, right? Because at the end of the day, like you're the one that has to tap into that for yourself. And you're the one that has to see that, just like as an alcoholic or somebody with an addiction issue, like, it's like everybody in the world around them can want them to quit and can want them to be healthy
Yeah.
and can want them to make a change. But until that person realizes that for themselves, like nothing that you do for them is going to like mean
No.
squat, right?
Yeah, right.
Because we can't force one another. And just like anything that your guides or anything that I intuit on your behalf, I could rattle it all off for you. I could give you the exact play-by-play of how to make it happen in your life. But like, unless you're there with it, like
Yeah.
it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You
You
know?
have to go on that journey.
Yeah,
yourself.
absolutely.
We say it every episode. We're all on
Yeah.
our own journey.
Yeah, we are. And that's a hard thing to also recognize as an
Yeah.
empath too, because it's like when you do love completely and fully, right? And with passion, like with everybody you meet, like even if it's just a stranger I'm the type of person where it's like I meet somebody in the grocery store and I'm like, oh, I'm John. Do you want to come over for
Yeah.
Easter tomorrow? Like, it's
Yeah.
like you can live in
That's
my
my mom,
backyard, like,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And being that way and being that, like carrying that passion and that empathy, like in compassion can be one of the greatest gifts that I have received in my time here on this time around the planet. But it's also like been one of the saddest things too, because it's brought a lot of grief and misunderstanding
Yeah.
and, like where you get let down, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, especially when you see people's light, right? Like you see the light inside of them, you recognize the light that they carry, but they're going through so much in like the physical plane that they don't see it in themselves. And sometimes the harder you try to like point that light out to someone, the more they shy away from it,
Yeah.
right? And so those like were big realizations for me around that time that I was having. And basically when I quit drinking, how I quit drinking was I didn't want to go to rehab. I have lots of thoughts about the various systems of rehabilitation
Yep.
in this country and how, they will help you quit drinking, but they don't actually help you heal,
Mm.
right? And some of them, require you like on the daily basis to rethink every negative aspect of your time when you did have an addiction issue.
Yeah.
And I don't know if necessarily like calling those memories of negative aspects of your life up every day is
Yeah.
really the best way to heal
Sure.
from those things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, we have to, around addiction and everything, there's also forgiveness, and we have to have great forgiveness for ourselves in order to be able to move forward. And
Yeah.
if we don't have that forgiveness or that even the capacity to forgive ourselves for things, like, it's like we can't expect anybody else's forgiveness to resonate with us either. So a friend of mine had suggested that I go to this woman here in Nashville who's like I mean, everybody in the music business like works with her and all that kind of stuff. But she's wonderful, and she did a session with me, and I went home that day and I went into my studio, and all the little bottles of alcohol that I had hidden everywhere, like I dumped everything out, and I quit drinking at that
Wow.
point for that day, like cold turkey.
What
And
was she, an energy healer?
yeah, she did
Right.
Reiki. Her name's Mary Alice, and she's wonderful. She's in Green Hills, and um, I went to two sessions with her, and
Wow.
like and it was like, she had like said to me, like, one of the things that might serve you is rainbow fluorite. Like she gives you like some supplements like milk thistle, like
Yeah.
some things to help, like, also like to clear my liver,
Yeah.
like just some different like practices like
Holistic,
mirror work
yeah.
and things like that to work around and everything. And so when I started that process, like, it was like I stopped at, Cosmic Connection, which was the crystal
Right.
shop
Yeah.
like right next to my house because we lived, right by Belmont. And I got like just a couple rainbow fluorite tumbles, right? And I had always had like little dishes of rocks. Like Dennis, any vacation we've ever gone on, my partner Dennis like comes home with like we don't buy souvenirs. We just come home with rocks and sticks.
Yeah. I get
Basically,
it.
he's like a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah.
When we go on break, So it's like, so I think that we always have had that. Like when I was younger, like, and we would go places, and they'd be like, my mom and dad would be like, oh, you can get a souvenir, and I'd go straight for that bin of all the mixed jumbled or the
Yeah.
mixed tumbled
Yeah.
stones, where you can fit as many as you can
many
in
as
a
you can.
bag
You
for
can get a lot in those
$5,
bags.
and you can, yeah, absolutely.
Stick them in there.
So, but just those kind of things, like, and so I always had that connection, like there to like crystals and stuff, but I never really like understood like a lot of the meaning, the metaphysical properties, things like that behind them. So I started working with rainbow fluorite. Like a friend of mine was like, oh, there's this great, like, she's a shamanic energy practitioner. She's like used to also be a wardrobe stylist. She just moved from New York to LA. She's going to be in Nashville doing readings, and she needs a place to do readings. And at the time, Dennis and I owned the house next to us. It was our Airbnb. And so I was like, oh, well, it's not booked. I'm like, you can come and do your like moon circle and your readings here for a couple of days. And she's like, oh, well, I'll gift you a reading. And so meeting her, they had just developed the Pampa Messiah Shaman School, which is it's very similar to the Four Winds Academy, which is a large shamanic practitioners school here that Alberto Villoldo started. And they were going to be hosting their first class, and they were trying to do it in Nashville, and they were looking for a venue. And so they ended up hosting the school at our vacation rental next door. And I started that class, and it was kind of like, it was something I didn't really know if it was my calling. Like I was new to a lot of the woo woo side of things. Right. And so I was like, gosh, some of this is really like crazy, like some people like experience some really whack shit, right? It's like, what's going on, kind of a thing. And when I sat in that class the first time, and it was like, I was more comfortable than most people because it was my house, right? So it's like, I should have been like completely at ease, but I was like so nervous just because I was like, people start telling their stories, and they start talking about like astral travel, and they start talking about like, psychic downloads, and they start talking about like, the ghosts in their barn at their house, and, and all of those things. And like, and you're like, what is, like, where do they, I remember I walked over to Dennis, and it was like lunch break, and he's like, so how is it? And I was like, oh, it's good.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's some crazy people, like, like that kind of thing. It was like when I had my nervous breakdown, like right after high school, and I was like, and I like committed myself for 4 days, like to the like mental institution thing. And I realized then very quickly that I was not crazy, that I was like, that I needed attention. Like I was not like, I was like, okay, what I mean? I may have had some depression like issues and some anxiety and that kind of stuff, but it was like, it really made me realize like how like like okay I was, right?
Yeah.
And sitting in shaman school also made me realize how okay I was, because a lot of the things that I've been experiencing through a lot of my life, I realized that the more I kind of delved in and did journey and work and stuff like that, I realized that when I was very young, a lot of the experiences that I was having were very much around me being an empath, me being able to hear voices, me being able to communicate with the trees and the birds, not in a we're sitting having a conversation way, but energetically, to feel my great connection I had to water, whenever I would get in the lake where my aunt and uncle had a cabin nearby my hometown, how connected I felt into source and into spirit at that time. And so the shaman school is it's basically a 1.5-year process. You go and you walk the medicine wheel, which is walking in the 4 directions. Shamanism is something that's practiced. There's Tibetan shamanism and Peruvian shamanism and West African shamanism and Celtic shamanism. And there's all these different kind of modalities and varieties of this really similar belief system and working around the 7 energy centers in the body, the chakra system. And really kind of delving in and looking at that possibility of healing yourself, right? I think that the world, we kind of mentioned before we started, the world right now is very much caught up in a influx of practitioners and modalities, right? And there's definitely, and with social media, even more so, you've got the shaman that has 1.2 million followers.
Everyone
and then
has
you have,
shtick.
yeah, right. Exactly. But what happens is, I think, when you start getting becoming a energy worker or a practitioner, is a huge gift. But when you don't release your ego in the process of raising your potential with that gift, your gift starts to mean a little bit less, right? I think, I've always said, and as far as my own energy work goes, if I'm going to go sit in a session with somebody, I'd rather sit in a session with somebody that doubts their abilities and doubts their capabilities, because it's coming from a more genuine place than sitting down with somebody who's went into the 9 levels of master practitioner work that they've done, and and are always referring to themselves in the way of I come to me, I will heal you. I'm a healer. I'm that kind of thing. And it's and for me, I have a really hard time with that. It's I think I've learned, and the way I look at what I do when I do sessions with people, when I go to their homes, when I go to their land, is all I'm doing is I'm a conduit, right? I am allowing the opportunity for energy that's not serving either you, your physical body, your space you live in, the land that you are where your animals graze, whatever that may be. I'm allowing, I'm working as a conduit to transmute that energy, so then you are able to kind of rotate and live your life in a way where you can see it differently, right? Because I call it creating space, right? So it's I'm going in, I'm working with energy that's not serving you in your body, we're transmuting it, getting rid of it, so then you can see yourself in a new light. The light that I see in you, that's kind of sheathed in dark, or cloaked in darkness, I guess, right? Having energy work done releases that darkness, so then you can see your light. It's I like to say, it's I'm holding up a new mirror for you to see yourself in, right? Because it's we get so used to looking in the own mirror that we've created for ourselves, right? It's and you miss wonderful, beautiful aspects of your personality and your physical appearance, because we become so jaded about ourselves,
or even what we've been told,
right?
We've become a version of what other people have told us,
right? I mean, honestly, I think most people that are on a path of enlightenment and stuff like that, you spend the greatest portion of the first part of that journey really deconstructing all the opinions that were placed upon you, right? And you look at a lot of, and that's why I think young people right now are age group, like the Gen Zs, the
Yeah.
like the younger gen, the millennials, like they're so lucky because they have like parents like y'all that are like,
Oh, yeah.
that are like, kind of a little
Yeah.
woo woo themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like you're providing them the opportunity though to like truly be themselves and to
Yeah.
experience their life and to make decisions for themselves that
Mhm.
like, and to be able to talk to you about things that were always taboo, like for my
Right.
generation. Like
Yeah.
it's like you just did what you were told and you didn't talk about
Yeah.
stuff if nobody wanted to talk about it. And
Yeah.
and it was like men behave like this, women behave like
Yeah.
this, men don't do this, women don't do that.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
this is your job, this is her job, like,
Yeah.
and it was all very like, kind of this very linear kind of path that you were
Yeah.
supposed to be on. It's like we were talking, it's like you get a job, you stick with it until
Yeah.
the day you die, you collect your 401k.
Yeah.
Like, it's like there was no, like when I quit my job as a wardrobe stylist when I retired in 2020 during COVID, like, I mean, I was making a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
And, I think most people in my life thought I'd like completely like lost my stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, not only was it a financial thing, but it was also, people have a very kind of unfortunate view of like the entertainment business
Right.
too.
Yeah, they
And for
think it's
something that,
amazing.
for something that provides such beautiful like entertainment and music and all of those things, there's a very like, there's a dark
side.
energy that like it
Oh, yeah.
revolves in, right?
Mhm.
And so you don't realize that, like that people like they're like, oh my gosh, you get to fly on private planes and you get to be at the Four Seasons and you get to go buy all these amazing clothes and you get to do all this, but it's like, but the amount of like destruction it was doing to me on the inside was
Yeah.
not healthy.
Yeah.
So like even after I quit drinking, like I ended up getting my client roster filled back up. I started doing my own agency, a creative agency where I was repping other hair, makeup, and wardrobe and photographers and that kind of thing. And then COVID happened, and it was like my partner does real estate, so neither one of us were working, right? And so we were sitting at home on a Saturday in like May. It was like the day before Mother's Day, and I was scrolling through my Facebook feed, and one of our neighbors, who is her husband is a tour manager in town here, and she had posted like, "Who wants to be our neighbor?" And she posted the front of our house that we currently live in, and it's like, and I, of course, at that point in my life was really listening to my intuition and my guides. And so I was like, I don't know. I called for Dennis and I'm like, you need to figure out what the MLS number is on this house and like look it up online and see like if it's if it's available, if this is like an old listing, like, like what's going on with it. Right. And he called and the guy was actually, the agent was going to be there the next day to do showings for like another group of people. And so we I fed Dennis's mom some margaritas, and I was like, because I had a whole plan, because I was like, hey, do you want to move to the country? Because she had a townhouse in Hermitage, but there was an extra house on the property that we were like, this would be perfect. Your mom will be just down the driveway, and like all that kind of thing. And so we went out to the house, and it was like, I knew like as soon as we came in the driveway, like it was like a coming home experience. Yeah. And then when you do practice, when you go around the medicine wheel and shaman school, you get to pick your shamanic energy name at the end of it. And Dennis is rattlesnake, because a lot of the energy work he does is with rattles. And mine is dragonhawk, because I do a lot of like breath work, and then also I use a lot of like feather fans and things like that in my sessions for as far as like clearing your luminous energy field. So when we walked from the house, and there's a cemetery on our property from the original owners. And so when we were walking to the cemetery, I found a red-tailed hawk feather like in the cemetery.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, Dennis, it's a sign. We're supposed to buy this house, And of course, he's a very like cynical pragmatist, or whatever, He's like, we can't buy a house right now, and we're not making any money, and like, like that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, maybe we could figure it out, And he's like, no, he's like, let's just keep looking, like that kind of. So we walked over to the other house, which is where his mom lives now. And right now there's a sunroom on the back of it, but at the time it was just like a deck that was built out there. And as we went to step up onto the deck, there was a rattlesnake skin.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and we've never seen a rattlesnake there, like since we've moved in, but it had the, like, you could see the rattle, like, And he's like, okay, fine. He's like, I'll do some checking, kind of a thing. So it was one of those like rob Peter to pay Paul situations to get out there and to get onto the land. But once we were under contract with the house, there's a carriage house on the property, and so we were kind of combining 2 houses from downtown, trying to keep one of those and then furnish this house out there. And so I would go out like a couple of times every week, and we rented the carriage house from him prior to us moving in. So I could just move stuff into the carriage house. So when it was time to move into the house, we just had to walk across the
Oh,
driveway.
perfect.
And every time I would go out there, I would make it a point to go up to the cemetery, and I would visit like the folks that are buried there, and let them know that we were on our way, that we were coming, like just to hold tight, we
Yeah.
were going to come, and we were going to work with the land and with the property, and really try to release a lot of the energy
Yeah.
that was there. And there was always a feather for me every time I went. I
That's
would come up, and
amazing.
it would not always be a or a red-tail hawk feather, but there'd be turkey feathers or blue jays, or
Wow,
that's
like,
beautiful.
yeah, it was wonderful. And
Yeah.
and now we've lived there for almost 5 years now, and like I still go to the cemetery, and there's never a feather there.
Oh, really?
So, but it was like the 13 times I went, like leading up to us moving
Yeah.
in, there was always, because there was doubts, right? It was
Yeah,
really
of
hard
course.
financially, because they
Yeah.
were, they weren't basing anything off your previous year's income. It was all like, how much money did you make last week? That's how we're going to decide if we can give
Oh.
you a mortgage. And that's how the crystal business came into play, honestly, because I had this collection of crystals that we had gone to like Tucson and bought a little bit of everything, to have for when we did like shaman school, or
Yeah.
like when I did session work, just to have some things for people to be able to take home with them. And so during COVID, we started doing live sales on Instagram. And of course, everybody had some stimulus money, and nobody was working,
Yeah.
right? Or they were working from home. So we got, it was like gangbusters. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
basically the only reason that we were able to buy the property that we're on right now is because of the income that we were showing from these live sales on
amazing.
Instagram.
Yeah.
So Crystal's bought your house.
Crystal's bought the house. And now it's
I
like,
love that.
it's like the crystal business is on a little bit of a decline with the recession and stuff like that. But, instead of being discouraged about that, like I look at that as, that's what its purpose was for us.
Yeah.
That they gave us the opportunity to move forward,
Yeah.
differently, instead of looking at COVID as this thing of like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We both don't
Yeah.
have work. And,
Yeah.
it was like the universe placed something in our path to give us something to work toward,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
To the property that we're on and
Yeah.
everything.
Not to spoiler alert this,
Yeah.
but did you know when you pulled into the driveway that day, what level of energy was on that property?
Yeah, I mean, you could really tell. Like, there's a big, like a 170-year-old American elm tree that's in the courtyard of the house, that you knew carried some energy that like wasn't necessarily the best.
When did you
right?
start really figuring out that there was
well,
some work to do energetically on
It was
the
about a
property?
month after we moved in. Well,
Okay.
no, actually, like 2 weeks. So the septic tank at our house and then the septic tank at Dennis's mom's house, both of them started leaking. There was big puddles of water like on the around the area where the septic tank was. So we had to have all new field lines dug for like both septic tanks and have them like reconfigured.
Septic is country sewer, everybody.
Yes, country
Yeah.
sewer.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so we had to have both of those done, which is, a costly project.
Yeah,
like
so
money we weren't
costly.
necessarily like thinking about spending on new septic tanks. We were like trying to get like some stuff, updated on the house and that kind of thing. And then about like a couple weeks after that, like Dennis had went downstairs and he went to fill up his like container for the water for his like little Keurig cafe situation. And when he pushed it up against the lever, water started spraying out like the top of the refrigerator into the room. And then when he opened the refrigerator door, the hole inside the refrigerator was like drenched with water. So overnight, somehow this like pin-size hole developed in this metal water line. It's the braided metal water lines, So somehow it got a pinhole in it. And of course they like could not find a replacement part, and he couldn't even find like a replacement door so it still doesn't work because we couldn't fix it, And so I was like, okay. And then a couple weeks after that, like he went down to use a little sprayer on the kitchen faucet to spray the sink out, and as soon as he hit the button to bring the water, like it like shot out the side of the hose. Also a little pinhole, we had to get that replaced.
It's
About a
funny how
month
the
after,
house was talking to
yeah,
you.
the house was, about a month after that, like he went down and there was water all over the kitchen floor, and it's all in the same space. The back portion of our house, which was originally the 2-room cabin that was built in 1849, burnt down twice, and there were 3 lives that were lost in the fire. After doing, some figuring out and everything, we realized that one of them was a 7-year-old boy who him and his father died trying to put out the fire. And his name was Xavier, and we realized that he was a little jokester and that he
The
was
water.
basically going around poking holes in stuff, you know.
I love
And so like in the jug of water that like leaked all over the floor like overnight, and it would happen in such a short amount of time. Like
Yeah.
it would literally, like the water dispenser on the refrigerator worked, we went to bed, got up the next morning, and there's a
Yeah.
hole in it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's slowly developed, you know. Dennis,
Yeah.
you know, took his little gas can where he does his like, you know, gas oil mixture for all of his, you know, like lawn apparatuses, and he like had just filled it up, and he went out to use it the next day to like go and like blow the driveway after he mowed, and the gas can was empty, and it had like all, and there was a pinhole like hole on the side of it, all that the gas had like leaked out into the
Oh.
barn. So it was just like one
One
thing after another, right?
Yeah.
And weird things like
Yeah.
that you're like, well, this shouldn't be happening, or like,
Yeah.
why is it, you know, like that. And so when those things start to happen, like in your
Yeah.
home or like in your life, right, like
Yeah.
people will be like, oh, there's this black cloud over me, it just will not go away.
Yeah.
Like look around you, like think about your surroundings, like who you've been talking to, working with.
Yeah.
Like, you know, were you at the antique mall and like
Right.
bought a new mirror and brought it home and put it in your house, right? Because all of that's carrying energy. Like
Yeah.
any gifts you get, you know, even plants and things that have like, you know, been like grown in the greenhouse, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, give them life once they get to your property or to your place. Like give them the opportunity to flourish, you know,
Yeah.
and give them their freedom and a blessing, and you know, that kind of stuff, and clear some of the energy that they might be carrying with them, that they
Yeah.
might have been carrying from either the grower or, you know, whoever directly handed
Yeah.
it to you and sold it, right?
Yeah.
That's so interesting, because I've known about energy, but that's not anything that I've ever thought about before. So
Right. Yeah.
that it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit more about the land clearing,
Yes.
and for people that don't know about it, or why it's important and how you do it.
Yeah. So when you're clearing your land, the most important thing to recognize and remember is that like land holds no boundaries, right? Like just because your plot line on your house says like you own from here to here, like the land doesn't recognize that, right?
Right.
So when you're creating your grid on your land or on your property, it's important to like, you know, to establish those boundaries, because long after you create your grid and you clear your land, if you're not establishing like a strong enough grid or around the property, like, you know, the land near it or the homes near it or the people near it are going to leach off from the positive energy
Right.
that you're creating in your space, right? So it's like, even though like every day like you're trying to raise your vibration, like of the land, of the people that live there, that kind of thing, like, and you're like, I just don't understand why we're not making any headway here. Like it just feels like we're kind of like stuck in this energetic rut. And it's because basically like a lot of the work that you're doing on your own land is, you know, being filtered off to, you know, the properties or the people around you, right? So I think the most important thing to remember is that like not all energy, not all spirits are bad, right? Like
Yep.
it's like some of those elementals, the fairies,
Yep.
the
Love the fairies.
the mermaid energy, the water energy, the, you know, the gnomes, like, you know, all of those things, like you want to keep those around, right? Because those are your
Yeah.
protectors.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, in Tennessee here, we have a lot of First People, Native American energy that's been here for thousands of years.
Yeah.
You know, some of those beings and those entities are left on the land to protect the land, you know, because they were basically pushed off from it. And
Indigenous.
you know, and so it's like they energetically would leave, you know, spirit energy of the tribe there to protect the energy. So like for us, like when we moved in, you know, it's like they're not aware of like our intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like they didn't know what we were there for. Like, you know, and we come in and, you know, and Dennis and I are kind of like, you know, a couple of gables and a china cabinet, you know. It's like we're gonna redecorate this and paint that and tear that down, and we're gonna, you know, do all this
Project time.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Yeah,
it's
here
like
they
I think
come.
all the energies, and they were all just like, oh crap, you know, kind of a thing. So and we didn't, maybe like even when we first moved in, like we didn't have as many conversations with those energies as we should have had too,
Yeah.
right? Like because a lot of times if you just sit and like explain what you're going to do, like, you know, we're not taking down the house, we're going to just paint, and we're going to, you know, like the retreat house, the next house next door, when we got that, the woman who built the house in 1983, like, you know, she died in 2014, but she was still there, very much so, like in the space.
Right.
And she did not like me at all. In fact, like I always, I'm like, how do you not? I'm very charming. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, it's very
What's
rare
going
that people
on?
do not like me.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. But like, so I was like, this is just so bizarre. Like, I'm like not understanding like how I just can feel like my energetic relationship with her was off. And it was because that like when we came to look at the house the first time to decide if we were going to buy it, like I went through it and I was like, oh, we can paint over that wallpaper. We can change the cabinets here.
Like,
We're going to
asshole.
like do, you know what I mean? Like that kind
Yeah.
of thing. And so I was like dismantling everything that like she had built back in
Right.
1983.
Right.
And so energetically, like she was somewhat blocking our progress
Right,
on the
yeah.
house because she didn't feel like she was afraid like we were going to do all this work on it and then flip it and sell it to somebody else. And like, so we had to have like, a friend of ours, Angie, who you all have on your podcast.
Lovely Angie.
She came and we did a session around the house, and we communicated with Loretta, and we told her like what our plans were with the house, and that we were going to keep it, we weren't going to sell it, like that it was that kind of thing, and so she and I repaired our relationship, and we're good now. So
your property,
friends now.
it literally became your like hands-on project of
Yeah.
energy. Like
absolutely,
you got schooled by your own property.
Oh my gosh,
basically.
yeah, absolutely. And still to this day, like there's still things that happen every day where I'm like, okay, I
say your own property, but like you corrected earlier, you said you don't refer to it as our land.
Well, we're stewards of. We're lucky enough to be the stewards of this land, right?
So the property,
the land protectors, right? In the Pampa which is the name of the shaman school which I studied with, where I co-teach. Pampa means earth keeper. So I think that you receive your Pampa rights, which are your earth keeper rights, and I think if more of us started looking at ourselves as earth keepers, I think that our relationships with not only the earth but like with one another would change differently too, because I think one of the main things that you really focus on throughout that school and throughout that class is the principle of oneness, where it's like if you can look at anybody and you can find a little bit of yourself or your past in them, like it becomes so much easier to like live with unconditional love, right? It's like when you're looking at everybody outside of yourself and you're seeing them like as a stranger, right? Like then that's exactly how most of your life is going to be lived, you know, and that includes the energetic aspects of your life too. Like the more you become one with your land, right? And the critters on it, the bees, the snakes, the bugs, like all that kind of stuff, and you recognize them as like viable, important things, right? Like that are on this planet, like then the more that you're going to be able, the more abundance and the more benefit you're going to receive from the land.
So to create an analogy for people who might not understand energy, because I think like you'd be really surprised at the amount of people who don't even understand the idea of energy. It's like everyone kind of, if you to walk into a room that just got vacuumed, and someone steps on the carpet and you leave a print, and then someone else steps on the carpet and someone else it's like it's everyone's imprint that's left, and it, like you said, it could be plant, animal, human, whatever. So when you came on this property, there was an old slave graveyard, there was Native American burial,
there's what we think is a Native American sacred space behind the house,
and then you had energy in the home of trauma. So this was like just a whole ball of
it was a
wax.
Definitely we did like a clearing with a friend of ours who's a Reiki practitioner, and we came over and we had singing bowls and sage and Palo Santo, and clearings that I had done before that I was like, oh, this is like all we're gonna need to do, you know, and everything's gonna be great. But there was so many layers to that onion of that property, I mean, it had not only like the first people, the Native American folks, but like starting in 1849, it was like the house and the 300 surrounding acres was a plantation, and there's a lot of like people of color that like not only African American folks, but like also the Native American and first people that lost their lives on that land, right? And there's no monument to them, there's no there's no real recollection of their stories, right? And so reverence toward them. And so what happens is a lot of those energies get stuck here in this plane because they want to tell their story. And that's what we found is a lot of the entities that like kind of had like not always the best behavior, like were the ones who needed to tell their story the most, right? Whether it be about like sexual assault, or whether it be beatings or abuse or rape, gunshot wound, like whatever it was,
So much,
right?
yeah.
Like there's a lot, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, in 100 and, you know, almost 200 years of like,
Yeah.
you know, of a place. And then if it goes back even further, when you start to look at like the Native American, you know, tribes, you know, it's like you're going to encounter that,
Yeah.
you know, and you don't think about it like, it's like, oh, if I clear my space, like if I clear this room, like everything's good, right? But it's like, but it's still around you, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so that's why like the land clearing is important, because it's like you're starting at your outermost boundary and working your way in.
Right.
And you know, one of the like when we do like the land clearings, you know, it's like, you know, you start move in a clockwise fashion around the whole perimeter of your boundary. You know, sometimes you use a drum, sometimes you use a rattle, a singing bowl, sage, palo santo, copal. You know, I've got some pontifical incense from the Catholic Church, which is what they use for exorcisms.
Oh,
So
wow.
sometimes we have to pull that,
Oh,
pull out the big
big-
guns,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and get out the exorcism incense. But yeah, I mean, I think really it's about like not only the clearing, but the intention you're setting after,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
of
it's like,
course.
as you're doing the clearing, you're also flooding that space with light, right? So you're
Right.
bringing in the positive, you're bringing in the light, you know, from whence we came to where we shall return. You know, you're
Yeah.
bringing in
Amen.
that source, right? And you're like flooding that space, like just like when we do energy work on a person, right?
Right.
Like it's like I will go through and clear out the chakra centers, like we'll do like, you know, any kind of other work that needs to be done. But then at the end of it, the last thing I do is it's just like, it's a flooding of light. Like
Right.
it's flooding each one of those energy centers in your body with light, and then spinning and rotating that chakra back in the clockwise direction. So then
Yeah.
it's like really, it's functioning at its highest and greatest for you.
Yeah.
Right. And I always say that like our goal and like what we should work toward is to be kind of like, feel like you're suspended on a golden thread, right?
Right.
You know, some days you feel real heavy in your boots, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like you're like real, like feel a little
Yeah.
downtrodden, you know, like you can feel all your energy in your feet, you know. And then other times you feel it really great in your head, you know,
Yeah.
you feel a little heady and kind of flighty that day,
Yeah.
you know. So the goal is to like always have that golden thread, which is what connects our chakra system, to have that active, and almost like you're an energetic marionette, right?
Right.
So it's like your feet are on the ground, you're still walking, but you're walking lighter, right?
Yeah.
And you're walking taller with a better posture,
Right.
and your light is firing on,
Yeah.
like on all
Shining out.
cylinders, right? You know, so it's really it's the same thing you do for the land, right? You allow it to flourish, you allow it to help heal itself, because I
Yeah.
think, and you create the space for it to do that. And
Yeah.
that goes back to what we were talking about when people referring to themselves as healers, you know, like, oh, I'm an energy healer and I'm a
Yeah.
land healer, and, you know, that kind of thing. And I think it's just such an important distinction to make, to say like, you know, that you're facilitating the opportunity for someone else to heal themselves.
Yeah.
And you're facilitating the opportunity for the land to heal itself.
Yeah.
You're giving it a fresh start,
Yeah.
right? And I think because that's what we need. And sometimes that can be just a conversation like this.
Yeah.
It can completely change your whole outlook, like from how you move forward from this day from this moment
Yeah.
on, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that can be a clearing enough.
Right.
You know, that's why every energy clearing that we do starts with a check-in. Because a lot of times as people are speaking their truth, like, that is the clearing process has already started long before anybody lays on the massage
Got it.
table and we work with their chakras, you
It's
know.
almost like an acknowledgement. You're
Yes.
saying, right, this is
Yeah.
okay, I acknowledge this.
Yep.
This is a real thing.
Yep.
I really want to make change. And
Yeah.
then I'm going to, even like if you make the appointment, it's
Right.
almost like
Oh, absolutely.
it's a set.
Yeah,
a
it's from the
connection.
moment. It's like from the moment that you've made that contact and
Yeah.
you've like set that intention about like what you want to achieve out of that.
Yeah.
The energy work has already started.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you've already started that process within yourself.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like like we talked about alcoholism. It's like when as soon as you admit that something's wrong or that you might have a problem, you've
Yeah.
already started healing from it.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's why you have to do it.
Right.
You can't tell somebody.
No,
You have to...
Listen, I run into people all the time. Like I'll be at the grocery store at Kroger and I'm like, ooh, sister needs some work. Like, you know, and I'll be talking to like the clerk, you know, and I'm like, and instead of like, you know, and I very easily could like
Yeah.
drop in with her guides and I could say like, is it okay for me to do this clearing for her? Blah, 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 blah. But like a lot of times you're going to get the answer of like that they're not going
Yeah.
to know what to do with it once you do
No.
it, right?
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
going to all fall. It's like getting a massage and then going out and like, drinking, a gallon of red wine and
Instead of a
like, and
gallon of
not
water.
not
Yeah.
working out for 3 days.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? It's like that lactic acid just settles back into the muscles.
Yeah.
Like you're actually probably in worse shape than you were
Yeah.
before you got the massage.
Yeah.
And that's what'll happen if someone does energy work or facilitates energy
Yeah.
work for you without your knowledge. And it's
Right.
also sorcery too, because it's
Right.
like anytime you're manipulating someone else's energy without them knowing about it,
Yeah.
like you're not working in their best interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? It may be in your best interest,
Yeah.
especially if you're trying to like put a love spell or something on somebody, right? It's like, oh, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But then like, it ends up backfiring on you,
Yeah.
right? Because eventually like the trueness, the light shines through it no matter what you do in that
Yeah.
situation, you
Well,
know?
it's your energies, it's your energy.
Yeah.
You have to,
Mhm.
and that's how you know if you're working with someone well, or if you try and
Right.
do it on behalf of somebody, they'll be like, well, you have to check in with that person
Oh,
to make
yeah.
sure that we're okay.
Yeah.
Or I've worked with John Edward before,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he always says about, it's like you wouldn't just go into someone's shower
No,
and like just you'd have to you need permission.
permission,
To go into someone's
absolutely.
shower.
Yeah, right. But yeah,
yeah.
it's definitely, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Like in gaining that permission, it opens that like that connection, right?
Yeah.
That thread for you.
Yeah.
I mean, people will call all the time and be like, I want to get a session for my mom, or my sister needs a
Right.
session,
They
like
have to
that
get
kind of stuff,
permission,
right? And I'm like, that's a wonderful gift, but like they're
Check.
going to need to call me.
Yes.
We're going to need to do a check-in. They
Yeah.
need to know what this is all about.
love
Like
that.
they need to know, like, I would like to know what their intention behind this
Yeah.
is, like not what your intention for them
them,
is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people aren't ready to face it, whatever it is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
especially when you start like doing energy work and you start going into like journey space and stuff like that and going into your past and
Yeah.
like doing past life regression or like soul retrieval of like
Yeah.
like picking up those little lost parts of ourselves we
Yeah.
lose because of trauma along the way in
Yeah.
our lives. And when you're going back to do those things, like you can bring some stuff back with you, right?
Yeah.
And unless
Yeah.
you're in a setting where you're going to have a proper support system for that integration, like after your session, like, it can be more difficult.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you traveled back and journeyed back and you found out about a sexual trauma that like you kind of were aware of, but like a lot of the details for it come through, like that can really like, it can really mess with you for a
Oh,
little while,
yeah.
right? Like if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not, like if you don't have the right support system by it.
Yeah.
So
Speaking of calling at the right time, I want to make sure we tell the story of one of your clients who was in the entertainment when you were styling,
Yeah.
called you after they had done a bunch of work
Right,
on
yes.
the land.
yeah.
And then you had to go in and help after all the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, they had bought a large piece of property and they were getting ready to build a home there. And, and it's, the logging industry, I mean, you can get a lot of money for trees, right? And so they had a company.
Which, by the
come in.
way, everyone is doing in Nashville.
They
and
are.
outside. It's really sad.
Yeah.
It's like they come in, they clear cut, they set
Yeah.
everything on fire, and
Yeah.
then they're like, "Where do I build my house?" Instead
Yeah.
of living with the land. But anyway, go
Right,
ahead.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, and that's we'll talk about that after this like little story, but like it's about like asking the land permission, right?
Yeah.
Like talking to the trees,
like a person.
yeah, exactly. It's like, do you want to stay? Do you need to, or is it okay
Yeah.
for me to harvest you? Is it okay? Like, and you get those answers, right? But anyway, they didn't ask. And so it was like after they did the big clearing of all these trees and stuff like that, they were trying to like build the driveway and the road up to like the top of the hillside, and the excavator kept breaking, the fuel line went out and then it was spraying oil everywhere and then the bucket wouldn't lift and then it was just one thing after another, and they came over to stop by the house and because they just lived not too far, and he was like, telling me this story, and I was like, well, I mean, and he was telling me like how they found a lot of trees because the Native American people would to show like the people coming behind them which direction to go, they would like bend like a tree down so it would
wow.
grow.
You have one in your backyard.
We do,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it would grow in the direction
right.
that they wanted you to travel, right? And
That's so
and it would
interesting.
right, and it would lead them.
Amazing.
It would lead you to like their sacred spaces. It
Or
would
water.
lead you to water. It would lead you, like all of that kind of thing. So, and he was telling me about all these, and I was like, well, this whole hillside, like, I mean, it's like it's all like it was, all occupied by the first people,
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I said, you need to like do a clearing like on the land and ask forgiveness also, because you've gone in and
Yeah.
you've manipulated like the landscape without really asking permission,
Right.
and then like do a clearing on your excavator and do a clear like all that kind of thing, right? Because it's like they're you disrupted it,
By the way, this is someone who you would never think would be taking, I don't know, it just seems like a good old boy kind of that is coming going, God,
Yeah.
what's wrong?
Well, it's funny because I think I look at, my spirituality and like the fact that like, I was in the music business and I realized like how much energy work I was doing while I was in the music business, like not knowing I was doing energy work back then. But how much more open-minded and like really aware people are than what we think they are,
Yeah.
right? And it especially when you start talking about energy and it's just it's like that, plant is energy, just like the pot it's in is energy, and like the Buddha is energy, just like the crystal in front of it's energy, like, and you start thinking about that, and and you start looking at things differently, like where it's like you have a symbiotic like energetic relationship with everything in your life, like not just the people, but the rocks you walk on, the water that you swim in, the birds that fly over your head. It's like if you look at each one of those relationships in a way of energy, you also recognize, again, back to that principle of oneness, that not one of those things is more important than the other. Just like my life is no more important than yours, my financial success is no more important than your financial success. Like, in fact, it's the complete opposite, because my financial success should actually help your financial success, right? If we start living in more in that mindset of doing well for one another and giving one another a good foot forward in life, like then we all can be successful. We can all live in a place of enlightenment. We can all experience love and compassion and empathy and safety and knowing what our healthy body feels like every day if we help one another, right? And, I think there's a common misconception in this day and age right now, especially that we're put here on this planet to, get a job,
Go
make
to school,
babies,
go to college, get a job,
make some money, get a 401k, buy a house, get the nice cars, have 2.5 children, 3 labradoodles, and a like, whatever it is, right? And it's like, and then you like all of a sudden, like at some point in your life, some people, not everybody, but some people recognize like how little all of those things add up to, right? And I think that COVID did that for a lot of folks. Like I think it provided a lot of people, like, it was really awful, and a lot of people lost their lives, and there were some businesses and things that were greatly devastated by that, by the pandemic. But other people like really found a great place of introspection, and they were able to see like the possibility for them differently, and it forced some people outside their box, right? And it forced some people further inside the box, right? It's like I think there's two ways to look at it, right? When you start looking at like energy and the way we relate to one another, like you either look at it with the principle of oneness, where it's like everybody is equal, everything is equal, like it's like I'm not going to go out and like kill that spider, because that spider's life is just as important in my life, so I'll chase it around my kitchen and get it on a piece of paper. And like even stink bugs, like those things, which
I name them Leonard.
Oh, do you? Every one of them's Leonard?
Everyone's Leonard, and I get them and we chat.
I know.
And I've never had a bad smell from them.
No.
We talk about it, and I'm like, dude, if you want to be here, I can take you outside.
Yeah, right.
And people think I'm crazy, but I name everything.
I scoop them up and put them on a piece of paper, and then I give them a little flick like that, like out the back door, But it's like, I think, but looking at, or you're one of those, one of the people that like where we've become so focused on self, right? And like our own ego, that it's like, well, I'm going to do good for like my family, my community, my church, my school, my little box of life that I've created. And meanwhile, there's like a huge world outside, with so many other like aspects of like belief systems, and just even their opinions around love, and like what relationship and commitment, and and new foods, and like flowers, and it's like people don't take the opportunity to travel as much as they should. Like I think it's like people wait till too late in their life to travel, right?
It's important. Travel's important.
It is very important. Like I always tell people, I'm like, if you want to like learn more about yourself, go to a foreign country where you don't speak the language and survive.
Get out of your
and that
comfort zone.
and you can be staying at the Ritz while you're doing it, but I mean, but you're in like, if you're somewhere else and you're experiencing another culture, like once again, it allows you to look at like everybody in the world with a greater principle of oneness.
You can't appreciate other people's situation
No.
unless you go and see it.
Right.
My dad took me to Nairobi when I was like 18, and there was a guy and he didn't have any legs and he was on
Yeah.
the street begging, and I was like, well, where's his wheelchair? And he was like, well, where will he get a wheelchair from?
Yeah.
And I said, well, the hospital. And he was like, well, they wouldn't give him a wheelchair.
Right.
And I just, because, you know, in England,
Yeah.
of course, we have free
Yeah.
health service.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even process.
Yeah.
And people were walking past him and like shoving him out of the way. And it
Yeah.
was, but it gave me such an appreciation and understanding of that.
Yeah.
So, and
Gratitude.
huge
Yeah.
gratitude. And
Yeah.
I've traveled my whole life, and
Yeah.
and it is so important.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. No, my mom and dad are always like, why are you going back to France again? And I'm like, well, why not?
Yeah.
You know, it's like every time I go there, I learn a little bit more about myself,
Yeah.
right? And I learn more about my gifts and my intuition and, you know, my relationship with the archetypes that I work with in my energy medicine and, you know, all of those things, right? And it's like, why wouldn't I want to do that?
Yeah.
It's like you know, I mean, they waited their whole life, right? Like worked, you know, got the 401k, the savings, like,
Yeah.
you know, got their house paid off and all that.
Yeah.
My dad retired, and then 3 months later, he got diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Oh.
Right?
I mean,
And instead of immediately going out and like traveling and going to Ireland and going to Australia and going to the places that they had talked about going their entire life together, like they delved right into the doctor appointments and the therapists and the medications
yeah.
and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where it was like every time I'd be like, well, we should go to Ireland, you know,
Yeah.
before dad, you know, it gets too bad, right? And my dad would be like, well, no, your dad has doctor's appointments, and they, you know, they make them for you like 10 months in advance, so you can't schedule anything to do in your life because it's like there's always a doctor appointment. You know, it's like, well, he's got to go to his rheumatologist, then you know, and I'm like, Jesus. So it's, you know, so they ended up never going.
Yeah.
You know, and so they like worked their whole life to be able to go on these trips when they retired, and then they were never able to go.
You got to live life now, because
Absolutely.
is not promised.
Yeah. For right now, like while we're able to experience like the world and like in other people's cultures and look at those as with such gratitude and gifts, then we're going to do as much of that as we can right now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I just think we have to as a society.
What
like we've
is
got to
that?
find. That's how we find the
We have
greater
to.
love.
We're all one. We've all got to hold hands and help each other.
Yep.
What is King Murphy Retreat doing? Tell us what you guys, you got it cleared. It's all good, people.
Yes.
It's all good
Yes,
now.
everything's cleared. We're good. So my last name is Murphy, and Dennis's last name is King, which is how we came up with the name King Murphy's.
Okay.
And so and the retreat space, we have a lot of there's a young woman who's one of the biggest sound healers in Nashville. Works with sound bowls, and she teaches her class out at the retreat space. And we do various other meditation retreats and yoga retreats. Every year in the spring we have our Beltane Festival, which is on April 27th this year. That's honoring the Celtic holiday of Beltane, which is all about building the fires in springtime, and the fires to last us through the summer until we extinguish them at Samhain, which Samhain is our other big festival that we do, and that's around the Celtic holiday, around the deathing, and it's the process of the trees losing their leaves and everything going into hibernation for wintertime, and it's basically the extinguishing of that fire. We have 15 practitioners of various modalities that come out, Reiki, bone casting. There's a wonderful woman named Simi in Nashville who does intuitive henna readings, which is, I've had mine all tattooed on permanently, and this is about 10 different readings, but I call it my soul map. It goes across onto my chest. I went from having 0 tattoos and not knowing what I wanted to having, a whole sleeve in about 5 months.
Project.
I know, right? Once again, it's all or nothing,
more.
0 to 60.
Yeah.
And it's just really wonderful, because if you're new to energy work, or if you're new to oracle card readings or crystals or any of those things, it's a great place to come, because we are providing short mini sessions. All the practitioners will have 20 to 30 minute sessions. And so you can experience multiple modalities throughout the day.
Lovely.
So it's if you want to I've never had a sound bath before, and I've never had my tarot read, and and then we have also a couple food vendors, and then we have 15 to 20. We have got 17 right now, I think, but various artesian craft vendors and people that make candles and tinctures and oils and all soaps and all of that kind of stuff.
All that good stuff.
And so so they'll all be there, and it's on between our house and then the property next door. And I do a little ghost tour, like it's scheduled on the one point during the day where people can come into our house and I'll tell them all the little ghost stories that, happen there. That we usually do more of that like in Samhain, just because it's the spirit of the time of year around Halloween. But, and so this year, like in the most immediate future, like we do a monthly full moon sound bath fire ceremony, which includes a henna reading from Simi. We do a light dinner, like soup and salad, a 45-minute sound bath, and you get a rattle clearing with Dennis when you enter the property before we go in to sit in ceremony. And then we do a fire ceremony in the Peruvian tradition at the end. So it's a whole night of woo-woo for anybody that might need to...
Put us down for that.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so we do those once a month. Like I said, we have our Beltane Festival coming up at the end of August on April on the 27th. There's another healing retreat in June that's going to be there. July, we have our Tending Your Inner Flame retreat, which is our Mary Magdalene Feast Day retreat. Mary Magdalene is one of my guides, an archetype that I have delved greatly into, like from when I was younger, even in middle school and high school, and growing up very Catholic. And the only things I really knew about her then was that she was the patron saint of beauticians and that people called her a whore, So I was like, okay, well, I'm like,
that tracks, I'll take her.
I always felt like an outcast in my small town in Wisconsin.
Like my kind of gal.
I'm like, this is gonna this works out well. But then my confirmation teachers and stuff, they wouldn't let me use her as my patron saint during confirmation because they said I was a boy and I needed to have a boy patron saint. And I remember that was kind of like my first moment where I was like, you know what, something's going on with this church. It might not be that legit. Like
that was the first.
That was the first. I'm like, what do you mean I can't have a female patron saint? I'm like, that's just silly, And that's really honestly when I started looking at like the sacred feminine in Christianity and how it was extinguished, right?
Yeah.
And the more I delved into that, the more I read, the more like lost books of the Bible, the Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi scrolls, and all of those things that you start to read, you really realize that like all the good parts were left out of the Bible.
Oh yeah, redacted.
All the woo-woo stuff.
Yeah. All the good
like
stuff.
all the stuff about like finding your path of enlightenment within yourself, we're all taken out, right? Because they wanted you to have to go to church and give your money to them and find your path to heaven through your priest, right?
Joan of Arc's alien encounter. Redacted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Reincarnation.
Yeah, yeah, all of it. Like anything that gave the individual power was taken out.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or and especially the sacred feminine. Anything that gave woman power was taken out.
We're gonna have a whole episode about the sacred feminine with with my pastor, Pastor Betty.
Oh, you are? Oh, good.
I'm reading the book Sacred Feminine right now.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to meet her too someday.
Oh.
But yeah, it's and that book, the Mary Magdalene Revealed, is a wonderful book that if you want to pass that along to her as something to read,
I want to read it.
It's really great because it's a great for people that grew up in very strict or very kind of
church trauma.
Yeah, it kind of approaches Mary Magdalene and like her gospel in a way that because it's written by a Harvard theologian who's very woo-woo herself, but she writes about it in a way that's in reference to the existing gospels, the existing Bible, the existing belief system. Megan Watterson.
Okay. Yeah.
She's wonderful. It's a great book. So if you've ever had like a draw to like Mary Magdalene energy, which is like that energy of compassion, empathy, and forgiveness of self, or Mary Magdalene, for some reason, the name, it just keeps popping up in your life for some reason.
Well, she does, doesn't she?
Yeah. I would suggest reading this book.
Yeah.
Because it's going to give you, it really talks about, and this is something we do every year we take a sacred feminine journey to the south of France. And we do,
put me down for that one.
I know, right? We're going to go in September.
Oh, I'm
and so it's like, and it's walking in the steps of Mary Magdalene after
wow.
Jesus's crucifixion, and we take her like path, and we learn about like the white ladies, which were like the followers of her, which were the women of the Celtic shamanism, which then like led to like the Druids, which then led to the Wiccans, which then of course then by the church were labeled witches, and then everybody was burned at the stake or drowned, right? Once again, a way to extinguish the female voice and the female perspective.
Yeah.
And so and we go and do that, and one of the things we do is there's this baptismal, it's called the baptismal in French, but it's where these two rivers meet, and one's a saltwater river that runs out of the mountains there, which a saltwater river running out of the mountains is kind of unique.
Yeah.
And then the other one is a spring that's called the Madeleine Spring, which Madeleine is Magdalene in French.
Right.
And where these join, and then the River Blanc is also joins in there. So, and Blanc is always like, especially when you start looking back, the more you read about Mary Magdalene and the history of the sacred feminine around the Cathar religion, who is also a whole religion, like over hundreds of thousands of people that were extinguished by the Catholic Church because they held women in the same esteem and they were equal leaders in the church to the men, and the Catholic Church would not have that, and so they just decided to get rid of everybody. You got the opportunity. You can either come back and be Catholic, or you're going to get burned at the stake, kind of a situation.
Perfect.
Yes.
Lovely
So
choice.
we delve into that like aspect of of the sacred feminine, but anyway, where these rivers and this spring meet, they call it the baptismal, and this is the legend is that this is where Mary Magdalene, after retreating to France after Jesus' crucifixion, this is where she did her baptism of her initiates and her followers. Everybody after they left the Middle East, like Peter went to Rome, and Joseph of Arimathea went to England, and all the disciples and everybody kind of spread out, and then they all started preaching their version of the word of Jesus,
Christian,
right? And that greatly differed, like amongst the participants, right? Like it's like Peter was very misogynistic and did not like the fact that women like Mary Magdalene and Mary Bethany and Mary Salome were allowed to be followers of Jesus and to be his disciples, and so therefore, like his version of Jesus's teachings is where the whole extinguishing of the female perspective began, right? And that's what eventually his version of Christianity is what became Catholicism.
Right. Interesting.
Mary's version of Christianity is what became Catharism, which the Catholic Church extinguished, right? Because she was teaching from the perspective of women being equal to men, and that women had just as right to give consultation and give direction to people as the male perspective did. But we do a baptism there, a baptism of self. And so it's like, a lot of people have been baptized in the church. They've been baptized, in various other places in their life, right? And this gives you an opportunity to baptize yourself in the church of self. Right. And it really honors that like love of self and how important that is, and the connection to yourself and all the things that like the good that can come from strengthening and fostering your relationship with yourself.
Wow.
And so when we do, so that's, there's one of the women who went with on our trip this past year. They just had a book, come out. It's a wonderful book. Marsh Engel is the author, but it's a compilation of various women's stories about like their path of enlightenment, like kind of figuring out their life and how they're coming to this place. And one of the women who is in one of the authors of the book, wrote a little section. She wrote about her baptism of self that we did on the France trip, and she was very much indoctrinated into multiple religions like throughout her life with her ex-husband and like all that kind of stuff, and she always felt like it was very like masculine and very patriarchal and very like male oriented, and she never like really, none of those baptisms that she had experienced throughout her life like ever really registered with her like as her feeling cleared or cleansed. And then we did her baptism in the baptismal there in the south of France.
Oh, wow.
And I knew she had told me while we were there like how special it was to her to have me be there and to baptize her, and I didn't like, it didn't really register with me. And the book came out like about a week and a half ago, and she sent me a copy of it and wrote in it for me, and I read it and I was like a big blubbering mess. I think so much in our life we don't realize like how much the littlest things like impact people, like that we can say or do for them, or just like even just sometimes that like putting your hand at the center of someone's back, like how reassuring and loving that is, and how it can just kind of give just people that the nerve and the courage to keep moving in the direction that they're going, right?
Or the smallest of gift, or the kindest of words.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
just time.
Yeah. I mean, which time, of course, is the hardest thing to give, right? We can give money and like presents and all those kind of things, but like the thing that's hardest to give is our time, because it's like such a huge commodity, right? We have so little of it, and then and especially when you have kids, and and then and then as our parents get older, then they kind of like become our kids, and so it's like, and then you have to look at all that differently, and so I think the biggest part about energy work and about what we're doing out at King Murphy's retreat and any of the activities and things. Like we're doing a weekend called King Murphy's Awakenings, which we're going to have like crystals, shamanism, bone casting, and Reiki will be the 4 topics, and we'll discuss them over like period of 2 days, and it gives you a taste of them, right?
What is bone casting? I don't
so
know
bone
about that.
casting is like collection of bones that you've like kind of gathered and initiated into this set. It can be little trinkets. When you think of like the gifts that crows bring you, like, you know, how crows bring gifts, right? It's these little baubles and trinkets and things like that. It's kind of, it's that. And you can put like crystals in there, but it's your casting kit. It's like similar to runes, that where you'll like hold them in your hand and you'll like set an intention, you know, like blow some energy into them, and then you kind of like just drop them. And then however they fall, like then you can like kind of, it will tell you things, like it will kind of give you some form of divination about what might happen, a direction you might need to move toward, you know, if there's a goal that you're working with, like that kind of thing.
My sister-in-law's Mongolian, and they use goat bones.
Yeah.
Oh, they
to
do?
that.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
So all those
You know,
things.
we're just trying to like provide people like with a safe space and enough and opportunities to learn about themselves differently.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
So
I can't, speaking of time,
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for sharing your
Oh my
time with
gosh,
us today.
It went so fast.
And
Just keep talking and talking.
we're going to do another whole episode about
Okay,
the
good.
bees, because you are my shamanic beekeeper.
Yes,
So-
we didn't even get to talk
I
about
know.
the bees.
Well, we're gonna,
Okay.
we're coming back anyway,
Okay,
because
good.
we have some work for you to do
Okay,
at our
good.
houses and our land and
Yes,
everything.
I'll be
Need
back.
to work.
Yeah.
Can you tell people where they can, well, first of all, can people work with you virtually?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's do that. Let's talk about how they can work with you virtually, and then how they can find the retreat.
Okay. So everything's on our website, Dennis told me I don't have to say that anymore.
I know. I always
Do you
say
still
it.
say it? I do too.
Always.
He's like, what are you doing?
I know.
So kingmurphys.com.
Okay.
And then, or you can email me at john@kingmurphys.com.
Oh, at least it's not a Hotmail. I've got a Hotmail.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
I was gonna give my phone number, and Dennis is like, don't just give your phone number to everybody. Like he's like, I put it on my Instagram, and he's like, no, just put your email there.
That's a
you
bad
know?
idea.
So, but yeah, so I can do virtual appointments. Like if there's energy work, I always do a consultation with you before you would book an appointment. Like, so we have, 15 minutes to like talk to one another to really see what you're going through, like what you're working with or working toward, it's a little bit, when you start to do land clearings, from a distance, like there has to definitely be more participation on whoever is present on the land, right? Because there are going to be like, crystals or like some things that might need to be buried at various spots. Like you are going to want to be able to go around like energetically, the essence of the Palo Santo and the sage and all of those kind of things like can, move through the ethers, right? And even the crystal energy can, but sometimes it's just nice to have those physical representations, especially for the person that owns the property.
Yeah.
Because you want them to be able to participate in the clearing also, because it's like their energy is going to be the energy that maintains that energy, right?
Yeah. Right.
And if it's just me going out doing a clearing, it's like me, like we talked about, like me doing a clearing on you, and then you going out and like, having margarita
Down in
brunch,
vodka.
right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, you're the steward of that, of your body, right?
Right.
So it's like, I can help you, but then you've got to keep it up.
Yeah.
Got it.
And we're going to share some social media content that we got today from both Kat and myself, who got some of your wonderful services.
Yeah. And follow us on Instagram at King Murphy's Stones, and also King Murphy's Retreat. We have 2 accounts there, and one tends to be more of the crystal account, but it's like kind of turned into an everything account. So, but yeah, it's, and if you ever want to, we've got a chakra trail on the property that starts at your root. We didn't talk about that either. Starts at your root and hikes up to your crown. There's various trees and spots along the way to do a little meditation. So, it's hard when you live in the city, like you want to be out in the country, right? And so we're providing a safe space for people to come. You can be as woo-woo as you want. Nobody's going to judge you because you hear voices.
Can I wear fairy wings?
And you can wear your fairy
Just
wings,
checking.
anything you want. Yes, it's a very accepting. Yes, come as you are. It's a very accepting environment. Like, it's really about allowing people the space to be themselves. And, and the most important things, it's my mantra every morning. It's like, I feel safe, I feel loved, I feel protected. I know what my healthy body feels like, and I'm impervious to the thoughts of others, right? And if we can
I love
remember
that.
those 5 things about ourselves every day, like then each day is going to be better and better, right? And we all have good days and bad bad days when
Yeah.
we're working with our energy and stuff like that. You know, you might have
Yeah.
a day where you might say something to your kids that like you're like,
Yeah.
oh God, I shouldn't have said that. You know, but like having the capacity of knowing it and also being able to go back and have a conversation around it and apologize
Yeah.
around it and say, I was going through this, it had nothing to do with you.
Right.
Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like the more awareness we have around one another and like how we make one another feel, I think
Yeah.
we would all be a lot happier.
We would.
Amen.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you
I
for
could
that.
sit here for another 5 hours.
I know,
with
me
you.
I
too.
know.
Absolutely. We're gonna make it a whole series.
We'll have to
Yeah.
do like a whole yeah.
Yeah. John Murphy's here.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you so
Thank
much
you.
for your
Thank
time
you both.
today.
I
Thank
love you both.
Love
Thank you so
so
much.
much.
It's
I
really
love you. I
special
like
to
that.
know you. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't wait to come on all those retreats.
I know.
I
It's
was
gonna
like,
be
I
awesome.
need to write them all down. But
I
yeah,
know. I'll give
that
you a
sounds
little list.
awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.